All right, George, I got you on here, and go ahead and introduce yourself because I think this is going to be a really relevant conversation for business leaders out there in the trenches running dispensaries, and talk a little bit about your background before we jump into this kind of inventory problem and the management of that inventory that retailers are having. So go ahead.
Absolutely, yeah. So my background is going to be really heavily on the retail side of the dispensary industry. So I spent about the last 10 years opening and running retail locations, really having my hands in every operation there, but very heavily on inventory, which is kind of where I came across these problems that we're going to talk about today with a lot of the cannabis businesses out there. And honestly, other businesses as well. I think like anyone who's doing a retail store has e-commerce and like needs that sync between all of their softwares. I think it's a very common issue that we're seeing.
Awesome. So you obviously have the background and the pedigree, and you know what you're talking about, which common in cannabis isn't the case. So, but who, if I'm working in a retail dispensary chain or a location, like who needs to be aware of this?
For
Like,
sure. Yeah.
what are those job titles? What are those folks? Like, who are the folks?
Yeah, I mean, I think directly it's going to be like your people in the upper levels of the store, your people that are having their hands in the retail environment. So, like your dispensary general managers, your inventory managers, director of operations or director of retail, and then like anyone who has multi-location cannabis retail stores. I think that's a huge one for whoever is overseeing the whole group of stores. Obviously that's a big issue as well with having those all be in sync and be lined up perfectly. So really I think it's the people on the front lines that are having to deal with these issues day in and day out as well. And I think those would be the people that would understand it most, if that makes sense, because they are seeing the direct implications of this in their day-to-day operations. So I think this would really kind of hit home with that group of people.
Gotcha. So let's jump into help me define for the people that watch this what is the problem, and don't be afraid to like unpack it and really let's diagnose like the issue of what is the issue. Is it systems not talking, et cetera, et cetera? Like help me understand that because
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, and like I think it's kind of become a taboo thing in the cannabis industry where a lot of people that they don't talk about it and they aren't speaking about it or even like addressing the issues up front. But I think the big issues that we're seeing is like inventory does not work when it is not structured out and it's costing these businesses a significant amount of money. And so I think the case is that it's such a new industry with cannabis and like having these state tracking systems like Metrc having to sync with Dutchie or with whatever POS you're using, that is a new thing that, we haven't really seen before on that. So I don't think that necessarily people have the structure in place when they're opening up these dispensaries or businesses to really to be successful in that aspect. So I think like the biggest problems though are obviously kind of touching on that, like your point of sale and your metric mismatches. So let's say like your Dutchie says you have 12, Metrc says you have 13. Obviously that's a problem, right? That's the issue where then the state's going to come in and you're going to report that adjustment. So I think that's one of the biggest ones is having that seamless sync between, your e-commerce, your POS and your metric.
okay.
I think packaging conversion errors are huge as well in the sense of like these are human errors that are being made in the receiving side of inventory. So when people are pulling in products or doing counts or whatever the case is, having those little tiny errors, whether it's a bullet point here, a number off there,
Mm.
that's a big thing as well with these numbers going into the system. And then you don't catch it on the back end, but it's the kind of one where you're going to see, oh, I have 100 more of this. Like, how's that going to happen? But it's a very, very simple thing that happens.
Yeah.
So I think just through, that's obviously a human error. So that's where kind of the hands-on training comes into it that, we can talk about a little bit later. But I think that's a big one. And that is one that I've seen a lot just over the years.
So help me really put that into my mind as somebody who's never done that
Sure.
myself.
Sure.
So somebody rounds up or rounds down and or something over time, and then ultimately that leads to like a discrepancy between metric and your Dutchie. Is that?
I mean, so it could be that way, Trevor. It could be that let's say they're rounding up or down, but to kind of break it down in the simplest way, let's say you have your inventory agent and he's bringing in an order and there's 200 3.5 gram jars. He misplaces a zero and puts 20 in the system, or he miscounts it, right? And he even puts like 195. Then when that goes into your inventory, products start getting sold, that number is going to be off all the way. By the time you catch it, typically, it's too late and you're having to just take those adjustments because you can't adjust it out once you've started selling those products, right? So I think that's like a big one where it's just a matter of like having that structure. And that's really where the cycle count structure that we're going to talk about comes into place, because in that sense, like you can make those mistakes and you will still catch them before it's too late. And I think that's the real beauty of it, is that you're not having to make these adjustments to the state and report all of your adjustments because you're catching them so soon in the process. So yeah,
Eh,
yeah, human error is a big part of it.
Okay. Is there any other like aspects of this problem that need to be shared with our folks out there that, have this pain point that we didn't cover?
Yeah, I mean, I think the other one that I would talk about is obviously just like your budtender scanning errors and product handling errors is a really big one for receiving the plus ones, minus ones. And so for those of you that are in retail dispensaries, you probably are very familiar with that term, plus one, minus one. But what that is just your budtenders at the register, they're scanning product, they're bagging product, and it's there's a multitude of reasons that could cause it, right? Let's say they have four of the same pre-roll in their hand and they only scan one, but they scan it four times. If
Uh,
one of those pre-rolls isn't correct, right? Or if they scan it the wrong amount of times, that's creating those plus one, minus ones. And it's the same thing on the other side, is that like if they're not scanning, or if they don't scan a product and put it out the door, then obviously that's going to upset your inventory as well. So I think for me and my success with inventory, like that was a big part of it, was really getting the team dialed and having like a very structured, very simple process in place that it should be the same for every transaction. And that's kind of the approach that I would always take, right? Is like obviously what you're saying and how you interact with the customer is going to be different for every customer because they're different. But what you do should be exactly the same every single time, right? It should be the same process, same procedure. You should be building that muscle memory out to the point where you don't even have to really think about it. It's just like second nature because you've done it 5,000 times. So
yeah, that's awesome. Like, let's skip. I mean, kind of hit on the implications. Like, if this doesn't get solved, what does that cost these dispensaries? And then also, let's just jump right into like, how do we fix it? Like, what's the 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 prescription to deal with this and remedy it?
yeah, let's do it. I mean, and so to jump into the whys of it all, I mean, the why does it matter? And this is one that we could go on forever, really. But I think it's becoming a lot more apparent to a lot of dispensaries and businesses in these states that are only opening up, let's say within the last few years, right? 2, 3 years. In
Yeah,
that time frame, the state, like respectfully, isn't dialed enough to have everybody's inventory tracked perfectly in the
yeah,
first few years, right? They're just not. It's just never going to happen. So
yeah.
what you start to see is that when they do get their legs under them and they do get caught up and they do get their metrics in place, the state audits they're getting a lot more aggressive and a lot more expensive. If you get caught in those audits and have multiple adjustments, and think of it like this way, if you're not doing daily cycle counts and you're only doing a monthly count, and then perhaps even for the state you're only doing a quarterly count, if
Mhm.
you're not counting those products in between, by the time you get to that quarterly count, you're going to have a significant amount of adjustments, right? The state is then going to fine you for those adjustments. And if it's a continuing thing,
Yeah.
what they do, and obviously it's different in every state, but I've experienced this in three different legal states, is that they will then assign like an officer to your inventory to
Mhm.
come and oversee your counts, or they will assign like a third party. So they'll find a company out there in the world that does, inventory control, and they will actually make you pay for them, make you as the business pay for them to come in and oversee your counts and then report to the state because they essentially don't trust you at that point. So yeah, it's a crazy thing, and I think a lot of people aren't thinking about shrink. of like, let's say a store that's doing $4 million a year, if your shrink rate's 1.5%, that's $60,000 gone. And that's before any of the state fines or, any of that stuff that you have to deal with. So
Yeah.
yeah. So I think like why it matters is just because chaos makes your life harder, and like it just makes your team stressed, then makes your margins tighter.
Yeah, I've never. Now that you put it into like real dollars, I'm like, whoa. Like,
Yeah.
and in some of these competitive markets, you can't leave that kind of money on the table, and you can't get unnecessarily charged. Everybody's seeking to find more margin and more profit. So it just, with costs rising, that makes perfect sense. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
Like that $60,000 could be your difference between, being in the positive or being in the negative. So
absolutely. All right. Well, then let's talk about how it gets resolved. Like what is the prescription that
yeah.
can go from point A, where this is a pain point I'm having in my dispensary and in my operations, to it's no longer an issue. We got this.
Yeah. No, for sure. I mean, and that's why I think it's very handy getting to build out a system like this, having spent so much time on the front lines of it, like kind of seeing the implications of it. So the kind of idea that I've come up with is about a 6 month like time period of training and getting your teams up to speed. But it ultimately is going to start with cycle counts, and I think cycle counts are the be all end all of having good inventory, and
Okay.
not just having cycle counts, but having daily cycle counts. And I mean, what that looks like on a day to day basis is very, very simple, right? Let's say you have, I mean, how many categories are these dispensaries having? Maybe 7 or 8 between like flower, pre rolls, concentrate, topicals. Like at the most, it's going to be probably like 7 or 8. So
Okay.
this looks like breaking that down into like a daily calendar and a daily schedule, right? Where each day you're counting one category with your inventory team or whoever is in charge of that, right? But each day you're breaking one category down and you're counting that category top to bottom. Every single product in the store that is a pre roll will be counted on Mondays every Monday. And that really makes it a lot less daunting for performing these counts and these audits. Obviously, when you're counting your entire inventory, it's a lot. It's very overwhelming and it's not an easy task to perform by any means. So I think having that broken down into like a very structured, very simple, manageable system where you're hitting on these categories at least once a week. And that's going to allow you to catch those adjustments, before they come, before they arrive in your system or before the state finds them. So yeah, so that's going to be kind of like the daily cycle count process. One of the most important parts of this whole process. I'm a firm believer on that. And you really can see it in the results when you start performing these counts. Like you will see your inventory clean up because you're counting everything and you're touching everything and you're getting your eyes on everything. So yeah, I really think they're just vital to this. Other than that, you're obviously going to want to talk about like your metric, POS, your menu, everything being in sync there. Obviously, some people are on Dutchie, some are on Tree, some are on Jane, some are on BioTrack still, I would imagine. So just making sure that that is integrated cleanly and seamlessly with Metrc for the state, whichever state we're in. But that needs to be, updating and syncing in real time. And what that does too is allows your menus, your online menu or your e-commerce system to be accurate as well, which ultimately leads to more sales because there's nothing more annoying than ordering something on a website, going to pick it up and it's not there, right?
Yep.
That's likely a customer that's not going to reorder with you. So I think it's like those, that's a little bit of profitability that you're scraping back there just by having your systems in line. So yeah, outside of that, I think SOPs for inventory are huge. Like a lot of stores, again, the subject of these businesses just being so new, right? I mean, even 5 years old as a business, you're still a baby and you don't have a lot of these SOPs in place or structure that they've never had before. So that's like completely something that we can do that's part of the system to fix it is creating those SOPs for inventory adjustment reasons and really just a really structured play by play of everything that the counts entail, everything that the team's doing, everything they're counting, really having that like the tools to track it accurately and hold accountability when it's not being, when it's not being done properly. I think that's huge, and just kind of, you really do have to hold people to it on a topic like inventory. Like if you put something in place and are not following up and not making sure that, hey, okay, Monday you counted this, there was one adjustment, great. Okay, Tuesday you counted this, there was three adjustments. Like that all needs to be laid out in data for everybody to see. Otherwise, you're never gonna really get a handle on it. So yeah, and then I think staff and leadership training is probably one of the other more important parts. Like, you really need to get people trained in product handling, in intake, scanning, shrink reduction, just like all the little things that are happening throughout the day that cause these inventory issues. And obviously, they're going to look different, and the training will look different whether you're a budtender or if you're an inventory agent or even an inventory manager. You're going to get like a more holistic training versus that really like, here's the points you got to hit every day, check these off, and you'll be great. But I think having that knowledge inside of your team is huge. And really just like, I guess, talking to them about the importance of it and of inventory and of these adjustments. And I think, a lot of the time people aren't talking about this in their stores, and your regular hourly employee has no concept of, if I misscan this product, what are the implications of that going to be, right? He's just like, oh, well, it's probably not that big of a deal. So I think really getting them like understanding that these little tiny things, right? Process at the register, handling product, leaving product out, like whatever that is, those all factor into having that 100% accurate inventory. And if you're not doing those things, it's going to be really, really hard to achieve, because obviously you're fighting multiple battles there. So it's really about like getting that structure in place.
Wow, dude, that's a lot of stuff, man.
Yeah. This is like my brainchild. I've been real passionate about this for a long time, just because I've seen it firsthand of like big companies, multi-store, multi-state operators that don't have systems like this in place and are just writing off thousands of dollars of inventory every month and every quarter.
It makes sense to me, man. Like from somebody who hasn't done what you've done, and I look at how like a Walmart, a Target manages
Yeah.
like they pay hundreds, probably millions of dollars in like extra security and all this. Like, they manage that inventory because that builds up over time. Those little losses here and there add up, so that squares up to me, man.
Yeah, no, it definitely adds up. And I mean, in an industry like ours, with just all the traffic, all the transactions we're having come through the store, it's like, even if you save $1 on each one of those, like over the year, it's serious money.
Yeah, that is. So, in closing, well, this is perfect on the timing. Like, let's say somebody out there is struggling with this. This is a pain point they have. What was the impact, like the point B that you were able to get your organization to after implementing all this?
Yeah.
Like, what does that look like in the perfect state? Because I want people that are hearing this to like know that if you're currently, this is a pain point and it sucks, here's what it could be in the future if you could get it resolved.
Yeah, for sure. And like, obviously, I'm not going to name any names, but like, I was with a company where we did have that assigned company coming in to do our accounts, right? So every single month, people fly in from out of state and we pay them money to count our store, which is what we're already doing.
Oh, that's insane.
That's what really ignited the fire in me to be like, okay, like we need to fix this. It can't possibly be that hard to fix it, right? So what that looks like by the end of it is we had 6 quarterly counts perfect with 0 adjustments, because we are catching the adjustments like the day of or whenever they're happening, right? So by the time we get to our quarterly counts, it's clean 100%. And I think achieving that 100% accuracy in inventory is extremely hard to do, but I have seen it. And if you do these things, like that's the path to get there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I love that. All right, man. Well, George, thank you for sharing that. This is an awesome piece of valuable information. So I hope if you're out there watching this and that's something you struggle with, do not hesitate to reach out to us at Terrayn. George is on our team and absolutely ready to help. And we'd love to have that conversation. So, any closing comments you want to throw out?
Yeah, no, I just, just to touch on that, I think that a very cool thing that we're doing is offering that free initial audit to companies that are interested in doing this, and that's something that could be priceless, and it's free. So,
Yeah,
if you are struggling and you are having pain points here, we got you covered.
yeah, I love that, man. Because if this is something you're truly struggling with, like just to get conversation with somebody who's already solved it is like a huge win.
Yeah,
It's like sweet. So,
for
all
sure.
right. Well, thank you, everybody. Appreciate it if you're watching this. And thanks, George.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.